Before I start my lecture, I will point you on this overview. It's a set of 6 documents which can be found next week on the website. It has some reference texts about the main line I follow in my lecture. The above reference text is in Dutch, so that is that's for the Dutch people, but the English translation is also put in the set. My lecture is not the Bible, but it is based on good experience, and it might be a help, especially for the young blacksmiths. Some of you have their own method of price calculations and own experiences, and of course, they are all invited to share this knowledge. And I hope my lecture gives an opening to share much more knowledge about cost calculations, etc. In the sheets, I refer to the numbers in the reference text, so that makes it easy for you to find back some information. My lecture is about the main points and providing general information. Detailed information, as said, can be found in the reference works. And of course, I can be called with some questions when later on in a month or so questions occur. And you can always write an email to the website, and then we'll answer the question. Interesting with the picture is that it's a Dutch saying, the kost gaat voor de baat uit, which means that you always have to make costs before you can earn something. It's a very old saying, also from the 14th century. And of course, you understand the English proverb, no pain, no gain. That's the theme. Okay, next, what I always want to point is that what is hand forging? Because that is what we are doing, a lot of us. We are using skills handed down through generations. Master craftsmen are able to manufacture and replicate metal products to samples and drawings provided by customers. We, as blacksmiths, believe passionately about preserving these hand forging skills, and find that there are customers who require products hand forged using traditional methods. But why do we use these hand forging processes? Hand forging is not just a process used to make products from the past. Many low volume bespoke products are more cost effectively made by hand forging due to low setup costs. And that is the link to my text. And when you see the introduction, cost calculation is as my experience shows, is always a tricky point for many blacksmiths. It is often considered annoying, but it's one of the most important things when you run your own business. You want to provide your livelihood and you want to make some money. You have to make a profit. Not only does your business have to provide for your livelihood, but the company itself also needs breathing spaces, reserve, investments, evolution, grow. In the Forge, we can divide the costing work into 2 large groups. Free work, you know, artwork, furniture, lighting, unique products, and specific, applied or not, for a customer, which are also unique products, like like stairs, railings, gates, furniture. It's in the sheet. You should always keep in mind that the cost price is more than iron and working hours, because that alone will not get you there in the long run. Cost calculation is not equal to what the work will cost. We are going to discuss 2 types of forging: free work, as the sheet says, and customer-oriented work in more detail next. Free work. By this, we mean the work that you make without an appointment with a customer, It's in fact work in stock. You have an idea for a nice design, some time to spare, and you get some time to spare and you get to work. This work ends up in a showroom or on your website. You can calculate price for this with the following elements, and then you see material costs, workshop costs, the design, profit. What I didn't mention in the sheet is also a cost for marketing and promotion as a markup on your total price, because you have to make some public relations to sell your products. For a pure and free work of art, everything depends on the creative added value, the demand of the customer, and your reputation. If all your work was sold during the opening of an exhibition, you probably didn't ask enough. Supply and demand, therefore, play a major role in this. When a particular piece of work is successful in sales, there is a great temptation of jack up the price. Try to avoid this, especially in the beginning. Provide a correct price that makes the blacksmith and the customer feel good. Too few asking is also wrong. You ridicule your knowledge and creativity as a blacksmith with this. What important is to say is that your knowledge and experience has value for your work. And the more you are experienced, the more value you can put in your work. That is my opinion. And for example, in the Renaissance, the painter calculated all his costs and did this times 7. That means something. And you know what the results are from the Renaissance artworks. We are talking about added value here. With a pure work of art, the added value in relation to your cost is great. With more applied items such as tools, knives, this is slightly less. This can, of course, change due to the demand for your work. Example, your reputation of fame as a craftsman or artist. When we talk to specific applied work for a customer, we finally talk about, in my opinion, about a unique product and a unique price for that product. Where with free work, the workpiece is already forged before you have a customer. You only start working when your future customer agrees with the price, when we are talking about customized work. This is slightly more difficult, but gives more security for the blacksmith. When you start working, the costs are actually already paid, which is not the case with free work. There you incur costs without income, and hopefully they will come later. We see 4 important parts to customer-oriented work. That is the conversation with your customer. It is very important that you have a good relation with your customer, because when you are in a talking with him, you can talk about his design, about his ideas, and you can translate these ideas to your own sketches and your own price calculation. And of course, the offer you make. And already, again, in this way of calculation, you talk about material costs, workshop costs, the design, and of course, profit. It's a misunderstanding that profit is something that happens occasionally. No, you can profit calculate. That is at least what I do. I look what my position is in the market, and then I think, well, I can earn this or I can earn that. But I also say to myself, I desperately want to earn this percentage, because under budget working is not in my vocabulary. And for your client, we have a saying, beat the Dutch, exceed in his expectations. That is very important. Your client must be very satisfied with your product. The customer conversation, this is where you start, and the conversations already determines a lot. You can ask, is there a budget? What is the budget? I happen to know that very much customers don't really like to tell their budget, and sometimes you have to work without the knowledge of their budget. That has also some advantage, because then you are not braked by working to that budget. It can make you make more objective thinking, I think, but that's for everybody different. Estimating the customer, what is possible and what is not. Sometimes customers ask technical things you really can't make, or are very difficult to make, or are not good enough in the long term. For instance, weak turning points for gates or so. So it's very important that when you have another solution for a customer's problem, then you have to convince him what is better for him. And that makes that you must be a bit of a psychologist and look in the communication what your client is reacting when you make some proposals. After the conversation, you can start with your work, and then you have to make sure you leave your client with all the knowledge needed to make a design. After your design idea is ready, you go back to the customer to discuss, and when you have an okay, you can start calculating the costs. It is best that you do not leave a design behind with the customer, because there may still be fellow competitors in the running. It often comes that when you, in your kindness, leave your design at the customer, he walks with that design to another blacksmith and asks him also a price, and then you are seen. when his relation is better. That is practice in our world. So try to have every decision maker at the table during the customer conversation. It wouldn't be the first time people will use your design to bid elsewhere. There are blacksmiths also from other fields who charge a price for design and quotations. The cost is then deducted from the cost price when the customer orders. Making a design is also taking a lot of time, and it costs you a lot of money. You can also make a formal retention of title on your design. It is not unusual, but you should put it in a writing or record it. In Holland, we do often make a retention of title so that nobody can use your design. Calculating the price, that is something special. In fact, what you start here is doing some quantity surveying. The main components of the costs are material costs, like iron, accessoires, extra, making a special workpiece, the finishing, possible placements. Workshop costs like energy, tools, welding materials, rivets. And for example, you can also include a fixed amount for travel. Time is what you have to, what brings the forging in time, what brings assembling on the placement and a placement in time. And it helps a lot when you are more experienced in estimating the cost of it. There are no standard unit prices, etc. found, and what I said, experience brings you a lot further. Price surcharges for indirect fee costs such as marketing and PR mustn't also be forgotten. Depending on the specialty of the workpiece, additional items may be added. When you start at a certain work, good preparation will ensure that your cost price can be quite correct. Material costs, this is the sheet which belongs to this part of the lecture. When making a workpiece, you need to calculate, of course. We already talked about metals. The price you charge for this is not the price that you pay by yourself. What I always do is include in a margin in what I pay for the metals, for the materials, and what I charge to my client. For example, 1.75, and that brings me advantage. Time and subcontractors you have to calculate. Often you don't do the powder coating or painting yourself, and then you have to ask other people to do this for you, but your client has to pay it, of course. And paint is also something which is underestimated, because we all know that steel is rusting, and it has to be good painted, and you can't do your job without, or you can't leave your job with a bad conservation, with a bad painting. And subcontractors, rental hardware, placing a workpiece needs, maybe you need a crane, or you have to need a crane to get a restoration project from its place. You have to rack your parts of the workpiece, etc. Often there are many things to calculate and to think about. Fittings for molding screw bolts, chemical anchors. I've seen that it is often forgotten. Think about this. Your workshop cost is also something you have to include in your offer. It is complicated. It is comprised in this sheet. Also is the warning, be aware of such expenses. And it also can be that you have a mortgage with a monthly installment, and that is also something that you have to pay, and you have to get this earnings from your clients. The theory is in the reference texts 3, 4, and 5, which comes on the website next week. Working hour is not an hour. You need the hours you need to design and make and place the work, and that is not always easy. A larger project, the more difficult the estimate becomes. Experience will play an important role here. You can learn yourself, compare the time you had foreseen with the final time you needed. My advice is when you make something, make notes about the time, the materials you spent, and try to analyze what you did. Try to make a kind of recalculation. It may seem a bit cumbersome, but it will certainly make you a lot wiser and avoid ripping your pants. There are no formulas for this. One works a bit faster than another. There's a small formula doing its round. For example, when you have to forge 10 curtain hooks, 30 minutes per hook, this would give you the amount of 5 hours to work. But that is never the outcome. The solution is to multiply these 5 hours by 1.3, for instance, because you have to rest, you have to move in your workplace, you have to manage the fire. So I think that in that case, 6.5 hours is more realistic. And still the magic formula is also here. Try to recalculate what you did. Take time for analysis. What you see here is a full automatic matrix of calculation. It is used by all the Dutch contractors. It is in Dutch, but I will take you on the hand to this scheme. What you see in the above line is the Dutch description about what is put in the matrix. And you see a description part. That is, can you point it, Patrick? That is, yeah, that part is the description part. And that is where you write down what materials you use. This is for the building, for contracting work, but it's also to use in blacksmithing. The next column you see is the quantity of the materials you describe. That is that column exactly. And the column next is the unit. So when you describe that you have to work 3 hours on a rivet, then you write 3 hours and you see 1 unit as hour. When you have to buy 3 units of steel for it, you describe it in your unit of length, meters or feet or inches. Then you see a column with hour standard. That is the column, yes, exactly, that is the hour standard. When you estimate that you have to work for 1 joint, 1 hour blacksmithing, then it's your unit for that hour. Then the column next to that totalizes the hours total. So when you have 3 joints to make, it takes you 3 hours. It calculates it to 9 hours total. And you can do this multiply with your hourly rate. That is the column next to it. You see the hourly rate. This is at the moment the calculation rate in the Netherlands, which is cheap, I think. And then the column next to that, you see the total wages. So that is what your work is calculated. When you go to the next column, Patrick, you see the cost standard for materials. And it's the same way. It multiplies in the next column the total costs, and then you get a column totaled for the units prices. And the most important column is the last column. There is the totalizing of all your costs, the last column. And in this way, you have a nice overview about what is your work consist of, what are the units, what are the unit prices. And it is a nice overview, also usable for recalculation. You want to make profit. When you have calculated everything, there's still a profit to calculate. Profit is the oxygen for you and your company. Material and working hours are not your real income, of course. That is an amount for which you give something in return and serve to cover your costs. Profit is the difference between survival and a healthy business. Profit is not something that happens by chance. As I already said, when I'm in the market, I think about what profit can I make and what profit do I want at least to make, and I won't work under profit. So what I say in the lowest bullet point, with the price dropping below the point of no more profit, is never advisable. This is the advice at the end of a calculation. Cost takes precedence over the benefit. Give yourself and your customer a fair price. And be wary of unfair competition. I quoted some American speakers about what you can charge and what customers, when they complain about your price, but I think these 2 quotes are very true. They speak about the Dutch abroad, and I never do what the Dutch do, and that is, in matters of commerce, the fault of the Dutch is giving too little and asking too much. That is where we are well known abroad, offering too little and asking too much. This is it. I told you something about the main line of cost calculation, but of course there are lots of more nuts to crack before you have a fair price. That is my end question. Also every day for myself. There's lots to talk about calculation and to discuss about. There is also other sister blacksmith associations have discussions about companies and pricing. And I want to advise you to, maybe you have time, you can next week join the Business of Blacksmithing 2 by our American colleague, Jerry Coe. He will discuss topics such as networking for business success, developing a product line, and working with distributors. Because when you are running a blacksmith company and you want to sell your products, it can be useful to think about networking. Who are your colleagues? Who are your clients? Where are your clients? You can find it in your network. And it can help you to make your business more successful. And developing a product line can also be a good way to earn a good, stable income. For instance, let's say bottle openers, craft-made materials for in your garden. When you give it a personal touch in your product line, it can help your company further. And I think that Mr. Coe can give interesting information about it. I thank you very much for your attention. And if you have questions, I will try to answer them.
In general, do Dutch and other European blacksmiths have difficulty in a profitable business? By John Dittmeyer.
I think that most blacksmiths can earn their living, but they have hard labor to get a good living. For instance, there is concurrency from fabrics in China when buying fences or metal stairs. What I see in Holland is that the most Dutch people, of course, like the handwork of the blacksmith, but when they hear the price, they turn around and they are going to buy it in some shop somewhere else. In Germany, I see that the people are more willing to pay for the handwork, also in Austria and Northern Italy. But in common, I think they can earn their living. But it's not an easy way.
From Becky Schimpf, can you talk about pricing artwork?
So just generally speaking, art is something that maybe has taken some time to develop. So it's not something that simply cost and materials and design.
Well, probably the question is how to take the design process into consideration or into the calculation.
That's my experience. What I do is I charge every hour I make for designing, for calculating, for discuss with the client, talk about what are the best details or what are not so good details. Like I said, the turning point for a fence or the hand grip of a staircase. And I also often advise to make some tryouts for some details so that the customer can see what he is buying and what he gets. And there's always room for improvement. So during the discussion with my clients, we come to a solution for a special detail or for a special problem. And then when we are fully commitment about the design, about the material choices, etc., about the way of connecting the joints, etc., then we start working. I start working and we fabric the piece of work. Is that a bit an answer on your question, or is it totally different from the way you do it in America, in California?
No, that's great. Thank you.
I think that all over the world, the general way of coming to an end product is a bit the same. You need to have ideas, you need to have hand drawings, you need to have a technical drawing, maybe. You have to do some research about the material. For instance, when in Holland you make an integrated part of a construction, you have to hand over some test results about the material, about the way it is constructed, your calculations about is this stairway strong enough, is it stiff enough, all that work you have to do. And often you get from your customer calculations in general, but you have to control them yourself. So in the preparation of your work, especially when it is big work, you have a lot to do to convince your client, but also to convince the authorities. That's not the nicest part of our work, but you have to do it.
There's kind of another question. I think this question has been in depth and properly answered, how it sounds to me. Another question by John Dittmeyer. Is there a general factor of increase for work in forging work if you use stainless steel or bronze in a comparison to mild steel?
I don't know it. I don't know there is a general factor. When you work with stainless or bronze, there are totally different materials to work with. And when I don't know it, when I don't know how much time it will cost me to make it or to do it, I'll ask advice by some colleagues, but I never could calculate a general factor of increasing.
Just like when I used to like in bigger work like gates and such, when you hand over your drawings, because you said like there's been, even for me, there's been cases where the customer has gone with the drawing to another blacksmith and asked for an offer. I used to put watermarks, like I took a picture and put it on Photoshop and just put my business name on it as like a watermark, just for a guarantee that it couldn't be used in that, like for another blacksmith. That would be a deterrent more so.
I can understand what you are saying. I can understand. I think you are saying that you can prove with your stamps on that drawing that it is your intellectual ownership. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Just like having your like
exactly.
business name on it.
Yeah, but when it comes to a trial in law, in court, in the Dutch situation, the judge won't accept it because you can Photoshop, and then you have to prove that you didn't Photoshop. So it is for the Dutch situation better to what I told you to. I'll search it up for you to make a formal retention. That is how we call it in Holland. That means that you go to in Holland there are some bureaus for this. They register your originality of your design, and when somebody goes away with your design, then you have a right to claim that it is your design and not anyone else. It's your intellectual ownership, what you register by then. And that's a safer way, but I understand what you mean, and it is hopefully it's not often a problem, but when you have a serious problem with a serious design which is very original to you, then it would be a very pity when another one goes along with it.
There comes another perfectly entitled question, Mariano. How can you calculate the price of a piece when you try to sell in a different country? When, for example, when you have more blacksmiths making something similar?
I think that you have to calculate your own price and you have to make up your mind, what do you want to earn for that piece of work? When you look in the mirror in another country and you see the same piece, you don't know if that blacksmith is faster than you, is he better than you, or is he dumping his price? So it's good to look what your fellow blacksmiths are doing, but don't stare blind on their prices. Stay at your own and calculate what you need, and never dump your price, because then you are ridicule yourself. And there may be very much other factors which makes that maybe your piece is cheaper or more expensive than the piece from another country. That goes about steel prices in Holland. steel prices are, the sky is not enough. They are sky high at the moment. But maybe in China they are very low. I don't know. So there are very much factors which are influencing the price. So that will be very hard to calculate. So calculate what you need and sell it for that price.
There has come a comment by John Dittmeyer adding to the answer to Mariano. You may offer reliability and responsiveness that are greater than the competitors.
Exactly. Good. Okay, John.
I remember this from being a web designer. There was like on average 10 of 11 web designers had difficulties to respond in time, and then the 11th got the job, even if it was not the cheapest offer.
But he was in time.
The 11th.
Well, I hope my lecture was a bit of
All right.
information for you all. And when you have questions, you can phone me or write an email, and I'll try to answer them. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks to everyone. Hey, Paul, first of all, thank you, Paul, for preparing and giving this presentation and being open for questions even afterwards. Thanks everyone who joined today's Treff. It has been a wonderful time together with everyone. The next Treff will be in February and will be held by, I hope I pronounced this somewhat correctly, Adrien Morat, who is a French guy. So it will be on the 21st of February, and he will talk about iron smelting.